find out what's an important variable that they're needing to find out about. So it tells you a lot of when you have that opportunity to have the candidate ask a question or two. Then, of course, after the interview is another very important process. So once you have gone through that process of, preparing, and now you've interviewed the candidate, you want to assess each candidate individually and not wait till you've taken every candidate, all of them together, because that could just really help you forget what one candidate said versus another. So again, having a cheat sheet for each candidate and taking the time. What we used to do would be that once a candidate was done, we would bring in come back, the team would have about 5 minutes, 10 minutes before we would let another candidate in. And if there were 3 or 4 of us, we would sit down and write information that was relative to information that was critical to us about that last candidate. And then we would let another candidate in so that it would not confuse what we were trying to remember about each candidate. And if you're a one-person interviewer, then you can do that very effectively as well. I think that it's always a good opportunity to have a process that you're actually doing 2 or 3 interviews and a process of elimination. So if you have say a group of 5 individuals that you're interviewing, I think it's always a good idea to establish a second interview with maybe 2 of your finalists. Then you can go deeper with some of the same procedures, a little bit more deeper questions, because then you have an opportunity to ask them questions about what they said before that you might have some additional concerns about. So it's always good to do that if you can. Again, as I've said, at the beginning, it's a process and it is sometimes consuming, but this gives you an opportunity to really get deeper with who you're going to hire and what you're looking for. And of course, when you're doing the background check, then you have a better idea truly what you're going to ask and what maybe you're going through the checking for the candidate's references. Then you're doing some background checks with information that's a little deeper than just some general questions. Obviously, you have to be careful of the questions you ask, and I know that Courtney's going to talk about that probably, I don't know, or someone will after I do, but there's definitely some things you want to get into that are more legal. But as you call references, know that there are some key questions that are critical to ask. And so have those ready in relationship to what the candidate might have said or not said, and then work your way through that. When you begin to look at the candidates and you're going to consider making an offer, know that the candidate has some also some anxiety. So you want to at least give that candidate a time frame. Keep that at least within the etiquette of being able to respect that they're going to find out within a time frame, so that they also can lower their anxiety and know what's going on. I think it's an important, respectful thing. When you get to the point of making the selection, then at least remember you want to first make sure that you make the choice and you call the candidate with the understanding that you're going to give that candidate some time before you define the non-selected candidates, because there might have been a second candidate that was really good, and if you selected the first candidate and they refuse or they they reject, then at least you have the chance to go to your second candidate, if that was, an opportunity that you have. So be careful not to be too quick in calling the non-selected candidates, because that might, ruin the opportunity for another chance if the first one rejects. Write the post-rejection letters if you have an opportunity. I think that's just another respectful thing to do. It doesn't have to be long. It can be very general, and it can be very basic, but it just gives that candidate, and it gives you something in writing that you put on record about how you denied the candidate, without trying to get into the details of the information as to why. I think that after the interview, it's good to have and define additional expectations that you want for the candidate that you're going to hire. And also be careful that you share the contract with the candidate initially, once you have made the selection, because that's going to be important in terms of that decision, that the expectations that you're going to have for that candidate. Keep good records, of course, always keep good records. And this is why, in terms of what I'm at least suggesting in the writing and the information, the notes that you have, it's really important that you be objective and be careful about what kind of notes you put down, because some of those notes could be detrimental if you should need to expose those. But you got to keep good records relative to what you're putting down, and in order for you to validate the candidate that you're hiring. Finally, I think it's important to keep a list of potential candidates with the process that you always want to also look at internal options, that you're once you hire this candidate, they may be eligible for a manager position, they may be eligible for different positions. So it's good to keep that process going. Establish a evaluation process. Important, once you've hired the candidate, you want to define a probationary period. You want to establish the process of continuous evaluation those first couple of months, so that you validate that what your expectations were for the what was the candidate, and what now it's the hiree that you've got. I would say that it would be really kind of important if there's any way that you can keep the interview process active. And by that, I mean, don't wait to hire until you actually need someone. If you go through a process of hiring, or going through an interview process, once every 3 months or 6 months, and it keeps you very focused on possible candidates. It keeps your process of keeping someone next to you who may be interested if in fact something happens to an employee or they leave you. But I think it's important just to kind of keep that process going, and at least you've got a system that you're continuously learning and growing with. Okay, I know that was a lot in the 20 minutes, but again, I can be more than happy to let you have this PowerPoint, give you some pointers, and let us know how we can continue to help. Thank you much. It's all yours, Andrew.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jesse. And now I am going to pass it over to Courtney Berg. Courtney Berg is the owner of Courtside Consulting. She's a recognized speaker, trainer, business owner, and HR professional. She's also an advisor to small business owners and managers on how to increase employee performance, success, and engagement. very lucky to have Courtney on tonight. So Courtney, I'm going to go ahead and pass the torches to you and allow you to share your screen with us.
Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to this. It's an honor to be here. I think, let's see, there we go. Let's see if we can get this going here. How's everybody doing? That's a lot of information. You're going to get a lot of information tonight, and we appreciate you being there. We certainly want to help you with any questions that you might have. How is that looking? What are we seeing here? You just seeing the slides there?
Good to go. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay, great. Well, I'm going to be talking about hiring, retention, and I'm also going to throw in a little COVID-19 because what would a training session be without that? So I'm going to be talking about that. Again, my name is Courtney Berg, and I'm honored to follow Jesse. Jesse actually helped me start my consulting business back in 2007, and he inspired me to start volunteering with the SBDC network in 2008. And so I was very, very happy to see him here tonight. Great job, Jesse. So I'll be talking about hiring tips, retention tips, and some things about COVID. This is all going to be at a high level. So bear with me. It's going to be a whirlwind tour here. Let's jump right into some hiring tips. How do you find good candidates? I think that before the pandemic, finding labor was extremely difficult. The unemployment numbers were so low that it was difficult to find solid candidates that would turn into great employees for you. And while there are many people now looking for work because of the pandemic, finding the candidates that you need for the jobs that you have can still be difficult. They may not have the skill set that you need. And so that can be challenging. I think of hiring as actually, and recruiting is kind of a three-tier approach. So that's why I put a target here. That first tier is considering all the recruiting sources that you can. Jesse mentioned keeping past candidates, kind of a list of potential candidates for you. And I have found that when we've done interview processes in the past, we hire the top candidate, but the next couple candidates are great candidates. And so if you save those candidates' resumes, even when you're sending them the reject or the thanks but unfortunately no letter, you can always say to them, I want to keep your resume on file in case another position opens up. I've never had anybody say, no, don't do that. There's a legal requirement for you to keep it on file, but I think just letting them know that you want to keep it on file and that they're going to be top of mind for you is going to be helpful. So make sure that you're keeping that list of strong past candidates and have those readily available. The other thing that I really think is important is to keep relationships with local colleges, trade schools, high schools, talk to the career counselors and the career centers to really build a relationship with them and start a connection with them. So I've had people go in and actually have conversations with career counselors, offer to teach classes, offer to be a guest speaker about a particular topic, bring value to that career center. And suddenly they're finding that career center is reaching out to them and saying, hey, we've got a great candidate that we think can come your way. We know that this is the type of person you hire and we found somebody for you. And so they actually become a great recruiting source for you, which is great. So that's why you want to build the connection with them and work with them and, give them value as well. You also need to look at places where you shop or your connections or your neighbors. I used to recruit for State Farm. And when I did that, I actually went over to Utah and would recruit all day long at a college and then go out to dinner. And many of the candidates I found were actually wait staff at the restaurant. One of the best candidates I found was someone who came in to fix a plumbing problem I had in my apartment. And she had just graduated from college and she was fixing this pipe underneath my sink. And I started talking to her and said, is this what you want to do? Like, do you want to own an apartment complex? And she said, no, I'm really just kind of waiting to find the right job. And that conversation grew into come in and let us interview you. She came in and she was interviewed and she actually ended up being one of the top executives in the company. So what you want to do is you want to really just dig into the people that you know, and have conversations with them, and talk to people overall, and let them know that you have an opening and what you're looking for. And that's going to help you find the right people. Now, Jesse talked about these next two tiers. The second tier is candidate screening process. And he did a great job outlining screening interviews, regular interviews, that you need to have more than just one interview. That is so important. So make sure that you do that and follow that process that he talked about. It was a great process that he outlined. And then the last part of it is the hiring decision and doing the due diligence on the selected candidate. So Jesse had mentioned something about reference questions and what should you ask and those types of things. You want to find out about the way that that candidate thinks. And that's why Jesse was suggesting the questions that he was suggesting. You want to learn how they think. So you want to ask situational questions, but you also want to go to their references, and you want to ask questions about how they think in certain situations. How do they handle pressure? And maybe give some examples of what that pressure might be. The people that you call with references may be reluctant to give you information, and that is because they just feel that maybe they shouldn't give you that information. They're not sure if they have permission to give you that information. They're not sure how that's going to impact their business. The first thing you want to do is make sure that you've got a signed authorization from the candidate to be able to talk to the references, and that you can get that to the references through scanning and sending it to them or whatever. And that paper that the candidate signs says, I give the past employer, and have them name that employer, permission to talk about these subjects. And so you can write out that authorization and have them sign it. And then you've got an authorization there with the candidate's signature, and you can give that to the company that or the organization that you're going to be visiting with about the reference. But your questions should be work related. They should be, how does that individual do in the job? You can ask about strengths and weaknesses. I would probably ask it in different ways. What did you find they excelled at? And can you give me an example? And why do you say that? And dig a little bit deeper with the references so that you have all the information you need. And then the other thing, obviously, is an actual background check. Being in the industry that you're in, you have to have those background checks. And so make sure that you've got the proper paperwork and a good, strong background check company to help you with that. Does hiring impact your marketing, or how does it impact your marketing? It actually does impact your marketing. And I say that because if you think about hiring and you think about the process that Jesse just explained, if you don't respond to a resume that came into your organization, or follow up with a candidate after a screening interview, or don't let them know that they didn't get the job, that's the impression that they have not only of you, but of your business. So when you're interviewing someone, you are talking not only to a potential employee, but a potential client. When someone feels that they're not treated fairly, or that you're not giving them a fair shake, or that they didn't hear back from you and that upset them, then they're likely to be more vocal about that and say, this center doesn't follow up with candidates. This center doesn't pay attention to detail. That's so concerning to me. And as an early childhood development center, you want to be very customer service oriented. You want to be very detail oriented, because we're leaving our kids with you, and it's important that you're following those details. And so if you're not following up on resumes and you're not providing that customer service, you're sunk as an organization. You want to make sure that you're living up to the values that you believe in for the business. And that's the message that the candidate should take away, is that you are living up to those values. And when you don't respond to them, then they may not want to do business with you in the future, or may tell their friends not to send their kids to you. So if you can't respond to every resume, because sometimes you can't, if you post an ad, if you put an ad out for a job, you might want to post a blind ad that does not contain information like your center's name, or we're the only center located in this part of town, or whatever that's going to identify you. And then that makes it a little bit easier to maybe not respond to every single resume. But if you use your name, I recommend that you respond to each resume that you receive, even if it's to say you're not hiring now. If somebody just sends you a resume out of the blue, or to tell someone that they're not as competitive for the open position right now, but you're going to keep their resume and will contact them should something become available, something like that. You know, you can think through these letters, and they can actually be just templates that you have on your computer, and you can just copy and paste them into an email and send them out. So it doesn't have to add work to you. You don't have to think through that letter every time, but it's good to send out some kind of response to the candidates that come your way. So what is the best way to communicate? Let's talk about communication when it comes to the hiring process. I worked in the ambulance industry for a while, and when we were growing, I would interview on a Monday, and then the next Monday I would do new employee orientation, and then the following Monday I would do interviews, and then the following Monday I would do orientation, so you kind of get my drift of what was going on, and I did that for several weeks. And so we actually had to make same day decisions on candidates so that we could get them started in orientation quickly. And so for a while, I would actually take candidates after they finished the interviewing process, which was a multi-step process. And after they finished that, I would take them outside and let them know if they were hired or not. And the candidates that weren't, you know, I would just say, hey, I'm sorry, we didn't hire you. We'll keep your resume on file. And it didn't ever cross my mind that I could be in harm's way until I was in harm's way. And I told a candidate that they didn't get the job, and they completely blew up on me. Two things happened that day. One, their actions confirmed our decision. Yes, we should not hire this person. This is not somebody that we want working for us. But the second thing was I changed my process to get back to candidates within a couple of days by email or phone. And that's what I would tell them. So I recommend that you do not tell people on the spot if they got the job or not. I recommend that you take a couple of hours or even a day to finalize your decision, and then send an email or call them on the phone to tell them what that decision is. Communication can be difficult in these situations when you're talking about hiring, but it's not the time to stick your head in the sand. You've got to lean into the situation and have conversations with them and let them know where they stand with the interview process. So let's talk about retention tips. Once the employee is hired and the work begins, you want to keep them on board. You've trained them, you're going through that process. So how do you do that? Well, first, you need to look at where your culture is heading. So look at your culture. Now, I once heard of a company that said all the right things to their job candidates. They talked about great perks of working there. They had a pool table and video games for breaks. People could go play. They had free coffee and tea and soft drinks and snacks all the time. They brought in lunch a couple times a week, they said. They had one day a quarter where the employees were actually paid to go volunteer to help do something in the community. It all sounded great, and it really drew a lot of candidates to this business. Everybody thought that sounded like a wonderful culture, and they wanted to be a part of it. The problem was when they started, the new employee got a whole different understanding of the culture. There was a pool table there and video games there, but no one ever played it because they had too much work to do and not enough staff. The management would explode on varying levels if mistakes were made. There was a lot of turnover because of high expectations and low rewards for the staff. And just that whole, wow, the culture you sold me in the interview is not the culture that I'm living. So even though the culture of the company looked perfect from the outside, once inside, the employees saw it for what it was and started looking for a new job. So look at your culture. Are you being transparent about it during the interview? I've had clients that have said our culture is fast paced, it's high stress, it's really slow, it's, you've got to be relaxed with the clients, and they're describing their culture the way that it needs to be described. So make sure that you're being transparent about your culture in the interview, and then also look at your culture to determine, is that what you want it to be? You as business owners, as managers, can create the culture you want. It's completely up to you, and you can do it. So if you look at your culture right now and you think, I want to change it, you can do that. You can do that. You can reset your culture and work with your team to make sure that happens. The other part of retention has to do with compensation. Obviously, you want to have a competitive compensation package. So keep in mind that your employees have the legal right to talk to each other about their compensation package. And they're going to find out if the pay structure isn't in line. They're going to find out if somebody in the similar position is being paid a different, a different pay structure. So that conversation is going to happen. Just know it'll happen. The other consideration is the new Equal Pay for Equal Work Act that's going to require companies to be looking at their pay to ensure people with the same type of jobs are getting the same type of pay. Now, there's some exceptions for seniority and merit and some other items, but making sure that they're getting the basic same amount of pay. Other requirements for the Equal Pay for Equal Work Act include meeting certain job posting, record keeping, and retention requirements as well. If you haven't heard about the Equal Pay for Equal Work Act, make sure that you look into it. It impacts all Colorado employers starting January 1st, 2021. So this is a legislation that's going to be enacted January 1st of 2021. It's very important that you know about it. So that deals with the money side. A lot of times small businesses can't afford health insurance. It's not something that it's so expensive. It's not something that you can afford, but there are other things that you can do to beef up your compensation package and make you more competitive. Look at things like AFLAC. It's amazing the benefits that AFLAC has and that they can bring to your team. Provide flexible hours. Provide, maybe different kind of working situations for people. Provide time off. There are some requirements that are going to come down the pike over the next few weeks and months and years, actually, that are going to be requiring that Colorado employers provide time off. But you can provide time off right now with paid time off and other time off avenues. So you can get creative. You may not be able to provide health insurance, but you might be able to provide other low cost, high value benefits to your employees. So start talking to them about ideas. Do they have ideas about different types of benefits or different types of areas in the compensation package that you could improve? And then the last thing I wanted to talk about with retention are three things that I've found over 3 decades that I've done exit interviews. I do exit interviews with voluntarily exiting people, so people that have resigned from their position. I don't do exit interviews with people that are terminated because typically those aren't as helpful. People who are terminated are usually more upset. And so you want to talk to people that have voluntarily exited and they're leaving. And what I found in those exit interviews was that these 3 things, management, engagement, and communication, have created more reason for employees to leave than anything else. If management isn't meeting needs, the manager is maybe too strict or too lackadaisical. Maybe the manager didn't outline the expectations and then got mad when they weren't met. Or worse, maybe the manager is a micromanager, not giving the employees any room for creativity or autonomy. That is one of the top reasons for people to leave organizations. So be thinking about your management style, and if you have supervisors underneath you, what their management style is and how they're interacting with employees. That impacts retention the most. The second thing is communication. So employees can't read your mind. When a manager stops communicating with employees, the employees will do what they want on their own. And then they get really frustrated when they're corrected because they didn't know what you wanted and they didn't want you to tell them how to do it. So make sure that communication is up on a top priority list for you and your managers, because it is the key to success of any organization. Communication tips that I might give you: have regular staff meetings with the entire staff, and then hold team meetings weekly. So if you have you have your infant room and you have a team of people that are in your infant room, and then you have your toddler room and you have a team of people that are there, you can hold team weekly meetings to get information to them and make sure that they have the information for their particular team or their particular room that they're watching. Meet with direct reports really on a one-on-one basis at least once every 2 weeks, just to see how they're doing. You can talk about issues that may have come up or new things that are coming, new responsibilities you might want them to be taking, maybe some developmental opportunities for them. But make sure that you're having regular meetings to increase communication with the team, with the entire staff, and certainly with one-on-one to increase the engagement of the employees and frankly the managers too. Make sure that that's going on. And then the third thing is just engagement overall. When employees are disengaged, they leave. And we've seen these, we've seen statistics. Gallup does a lot of polling and a lot of learning about, or a lot of, surveys about engagement. And we're finding that, employees who are disengaged just leave. Part of the manager's job is to keep them engaged. So give your employees autonomy as appropriate. It may be a stair step. They start out, they don't have a lot of autonomy, but as they grow in their teacher or their assistant role, then they can start to get more autonomy as appropriate. Assign projects to the employees to help them grow. You may sit in a one-on-one meeting and they say, I know I'm in infants, but I really want to work with the older kids. Okay, great. How can we give them responsibilities to work with those older kids and build that up for them? Take an interest in your employees as people. And I can't emphasize that enough. Really learn about them and what they're going through. If you know somebody got a new puppy, wow, make it a point to ask about it and see a picture. Make connections with your employees as people, because that's really going to get them engaged as well. So let me shift gears here and just go to a couple things about COVID. COVID has created a lot of barriers to success for us, and across any industry, it's really been tough, but especially in the industry that you're in. When things started shutting down in the spring and it looks like things are starting to get tight again now, it can be very scary. Now, as you could imagine, there's a lot of material we could cover about COVID. I'm only going to cover quickly 3 things at a very, very high level. The first thing is the new Colorado's Healthy Families and Workplaces Act, and what to do with employees who have an exposure to COVID-19, or maybe they are showing symptoms themselves. The second thing I'm going to talk about is, the third thing I'm going to talk about is how to prepare for an employee to return from work after they've had those symptoms. So again, very, very high level on these things. The Colorado Healthy Families and Workplaces Act really has 3 phases. The first phase is already in effect, and that's for COVID-19 related illnesses. The requirements that are found under the Families First Coronavirus Response Act that came out earlier this year will apply to all Colorado employers between now and December 31st of this year. And what that means is the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, or FFCRA, had some limitations in it. If you had a business that was over 500 employees, it didn't apply to you. These other types of businesses could be excluded and those kinds of things. The Healthy Families and Workplaces Act is saying it applies to every Colorado employer. And if someone is sick or quarantined due to COVID-19, they have a right to up to 80 hours of paid sick time at the regular rate. If they're going to have to take care of someone who's under a quarantine, or a child whose school is closed due to the pandemic, then they can also receive 80 hours of pay at 2/3 their regular rate. So, you can just look up Healthy Families and Workplaces Act to learn more about that. The second phase of HFWA, Healthy Families and Workplaces Act, requires employers with 16 or more employees to provide 48 hours of paid sick leave, paid sick time to their employees effective January 1st of 2021. So that starts January 1st. If you have 16 or more employees, then you're required to provide 1 hour of paid sick time for every 30 hours that employee works, up to a maximum of 48 hours. Sick leave begins accruing when the employee is hired, or on January 1st, and they take leave as it is accrued. There are specific purposes for this sick leave that can be requested as outlined in the Act, so be sure and check that. And then the final phase of this is the rest of the Colorado employers. So employers with fewer than 16 employees, this Act goes into place January 1st of 2022. So there are also some public health emergency provisions, and obviously it prohibits any retaliation of employees who use the leave. So when we talk about symptoms and onset, you see a list of the symptoms here. The first thing that's important for your industry, you've got industry guidelines, you've got state and local and federal guidelines you have to follow. Make sure that you're following that. Any sick staff or kids need to stay at home. Communicate to the staff that they need to be vigilant for symptoms and let you know as soon as is possible that they are starting to feel sick. If someone becomes sick at work, have an isolation room or an area that can be used to isolate that staff or child. Be ready to follow the CDC guidelines of disinfecting the building. If a COVID-19 is confirmed from a child or a staff member, and make sure to close off the areas used by that sick person. Open doors and windows to increase circulation, wait up to 24 hours or as long as possible to clean the area. So lots of those things you're already aware of, you probably already have in place. Those are some of the logistical things that you need to do. Please be sure to give the employees support as well. Let them know about the sick leave. If you have that time, if they have time left under the Family First Coronavirus Response Act, make sure that you tell them about that and tell them that they've got, up to 80 hours to get paid. Check in with them every few days to see how they're doing. You don't want to be harassing them. You want to care. You want to let them know that you care, show that you care about them as a human being, because they're going to remember that. Now, if an employee is coming back, you must again follow all the state, federal, local guidelines. The sick staff person or somebody who has had COVID or had the symptoms should not return to work until they meet all the criteria to discontinue that home isolation. And I'm sure that you're familiar with the CDC guidelines on that. You should stay home for 14 days after an exposure to someone. Symptoms appear between 2 to 14 days after that exposure. So that's why they're saying 14 days. If they had a positive test or were diagnosed by a medical professional, they can be around others after 10 days. If they haven't had a fever for 24 hours and they haven't used any fever reducing medications during that time period, and all the other symptoms of COVID are improving. So be sure and read the guidelines on that and make sure they follow what their doctor says. Their doctors are going to be instructing them on this as well. So there are more instructions and guidelines for those who are immunocompromised. I think it's 20 days instead of 10. I don't know, there's some more guidelines around that. But again, the healthcare professionals can help that employee know when they can come back to work. And once they come back to work, they need to continue to wear their mask and wash their hands with soap often and socially distance and disinfect surfaces as required. Follow all the health guidelines for the industry. As a bonus, I just want to remind you to update your handbooks. The document is vitally important, especially now. Many of the laws and best practices have changed in light of COVID-19 and the work from home situations. Policies that you should consider are dress codes, paid sick leaves, work policies in general, use of personal devices, all of those things. Also, you need to add, obviously, the Equal Pay for Equal Work Act and the Healthy Families and Workplaces Act. Those kinds of things need to be added to your handbook. So if you have any questions, make sure that you're contacting the SBDC, or you can always give me a call. I'm happy to talk to you about this. So I don't know, Andrew, if we have time for questions or if we're just going to move on. Okay, happy to field some questions.
Most definitely. Happy to take any questions here for either Jesse or Courtney. So we'll just take a couple minutes. Any questions, go ahead and unmute yourself, or feel free to utilize the chat. Okay, nothing. It doesn't look like anything at the moment. Well,
I'll kick it off with one question that I have. Courtney, this is Jen, but I think what I've hear from several clients oftentimes is, how in the world do I keep up with all these laws and changes and things going along? So do you have any tips for small business owners on how to keep up apprised of what's going on, but not feel overwhelmed?
But not get overwhelmed. That's the trick. So there's lots of things that you can do. There is, you can put Google alerts And frankly, I've done that too, where I've put Colorado employment law Google alerts, or just employment law Google alerts, federal employment law, so that those come into my in basket so that I can see them. And there are also services that are available to help you with that. So, companies that can help track that for you, that you can work with. The SBDC is, I know, keeping up on all of the rule changes the best that they can. And to be honest with you, it's just tough right now because a lot of things are changing. And so you need to be aware of that, and checking for those changes in Colorado law, and checking for the changes in the federal law that are going to impact you. So Google alerts, companies that can help you do it, and then also the SBDC. I think those are the three ways that I think will really help you.
Thanks, Courtney. And we got one in the chat. Is there any reimbursement to employers paying out the wages to sick employees due to COVID?
Yes, so there's a tax break for that, and that's something that you need to talk to your accountants about, or your payroll companies about. You need to code, if you're giving somebody the Families First Coronavirus Response Act 80 hours off, for example, for paid sick leave, if somebody becomes, they have symptoms, or maybe they're being quarantined, and so you're going to pay them those 80 hours, there's a payroll tax break. My understanding is it's dollar for dollar, that you'll get a break on your payroll taxes. So if you give somebody $100 for time off for FFCRA, then you'll get a $100 tax break on your payroll taxes. But be sure and check. I'm not an accountant, so be sure and check with an accountant, CPA on that, and check with your payroll company, because I'm sure that they've been doing it all year long, so they'll be able to help you with that very easily.
Awesome. Thank you. Any other questions?
I know that was a lot of information, so feel free to reach out, like I said, to the SBDC, or just give me a call or send me an email. My information's right there on the screen. Just take a screenshot and then you'll have it. And I'm happy to talk to you and help you through any questions you might come up with later.
Wonderful. Very informative. Thank you so much, Courtney. All right, everyone, we're going to take a quick 10-minute break if there are no further questions. So we will meet back here at 7:20. So feel free to step away, take a 10-minute break. And like I said, we'll see you back here 7:20. Other questions as well. We do still have our presenters from portion one of this evening on. So don't hesitate to answer those or ask those in the chat, excuse me, or go ahead and unmute yourself as well. Okay, great. Well, I am going to pass the torch here to Lisa Troutline. She is the preschool director for the Wiggins School District. It looks like we still have Lisa with us tonight. I know she was battling a fire potentially, or fire alarm in the building. So Lisa, thank you so much for joining us tonight. She's going to be talking on training, retention, and resources available to you all through the ECC. Thanks, Lisa.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Andrew, do you have the papers that I sent over? Are you able to?
I do, yeah.
place?
So I can open
you post
that.
those for everybody? So
sure
some
can.
of my stuff that I was going to talk about tonight is just kind of the same as some of the prior speakers. So bless their hearts, that means I get to go into some other details. But one of the things that I find that can be kind of a struggle is that in Morgan County, the employment pool is extremely shallow. And I'm sure that some of you have had that same situation where I'd love to interview a ton of candidates. I'm lucky if I can find a warm body, and certainly a warm body that fits the education and experience requirements that are required by licensing. So when we look at things like that, we tend to forget some of those procedures and policies that the other speakers that Courtney and Jesse talked about. They are very important to still continue to do those. Act like you're going to interview 10 people, even though you may not get that many applications. It's still worth the effort to go ahead and try to get everything in line. One of the things that I try to do is make sure that the program and the candidate are a really good fit for each other. I've had people here who were really good teachers, or really good assistants in the classroom, but they weren't a good fit for this program, either because of their philosophy and ours, or just it wasn't a good fit. And that's not a bad thing. That's okay. It's just not a good fit for you. One of the things that I like to start off with is my the advertising of the employment opportunity. I tend to make it more than just a help wanted ad. I try to put a little bit of the flavor of our program and into the advertisement for the for applications. And one of the reasons I do that is because our Wiggins preschool program is a NACCE accredited program. We're a 4-star rated program. I want our employee applicants to know that quality means a lot to us. It's also a great marketing tool because sometimes your families in the community will also see that advertisement. So it gives me some free marketing opportunities there. The other thing is that that's where I think it starts. And then I move into the interview process. Excuse me. And I've listed some of the questions that we ask. I tend to break those down into the different sections of what an employee, an assistant teacher, or a teacher would be needing to be able to do in our program, and to try to kind of get a flavor for, again, what they might be, what their personality is, how they handle situations. I won't go over all of those. You're always, they're just kind of some things that are open-ended. I really like open-ended questions. We like those for children. They really work well for job interviews as well. In getting a satisfactory employee and then retaining them, it continues into the orientation process. The orientation process, as you all know, can be really lengthy and really hard to do. Typically, we are hiring under the gun. We have to be in a hurry to get somebody into the classroom. They've got to meet all of the requirements. In our program and with licensing, I'm sure you're in the same boat, that there are over 20 topics of orientation that has to be done before the employee is really even supposed to start. And that doesn't count the fingerprinting and the background checks. I'm sure that most of you have heard that the fingerprinting process has changed, and that not only do you need to do the fingerprints for the state of Colorado, but if you've got an applicant who has applied from other state and has lived in other states, you also need to do the fingerprinting in those states. I believe it's for the last 5 years. That right there can do a real number on the time frame in getting somebody into a classroom, especially when you may only have 2 weeks notice from somebody. It becomes a real challenge to be able to get somebody in there and have them meet all the qualifications. But the orientation process part is also very important to make sure that they understand what your requirements are. In our case, I usually piecemeal it out to my new staff person. I'll give them the family handbook, I'll give them the volunteer handbook, then I'll make sure that they get a copy of the licensing rules and regs. I make sure they get copies of the curriculum and of our assessments, but I don't give that to them all at one time because they would go running from the building. We would never have anybody who wanted to do that. So you give it to them a little bit, chunks at a time, so that they can, number one, just assimilate it all, and then also to ask questions as they need to. And also when they are already starting to work for you in the classroom after they've done the major orientation, it lets them see the processes in the classroom, and they can say, oh yeah, I remember seeing that in the NACCE handbook that we had to do that. So it's one of those things that gives them an opportunity to kind of process all of the rules and regulations that they have to know. And then I also find that the satisfaction and retention of staff is just ongoing all the way through. Like just because I've hired them and they're working out well or whatever, I still need to make sure, number one, we do 40 hours of orientation every year. That does not include the 15 hours that you have to have for the state. And remember, 3 of those are supposed to be social emotional. So, you know, some of that you can get through PDIS, and some of that is more specific to what we're doing. So we use teaching strategies curriculum. So I want to have training on that every year, just as a reminder to keep everybody in the same boat. Those are things that you kind of have to decide how often you will need to do that training or how deep you need to do that training. I've added a couple of thought seeds here, just that I read a statistic that 15% of the child care programs have a 3 to 5 Colorado Shines rating. And of course, 3 to 5 is considered quality programming. So there's not very many people who got out of bed this morning and said, gee, I really want to go work at a crappy place today. You know, that isn't what we do. You want your employees to be proud of where they're working. You want them to be able to really scaffold everything that they're doing so that you can get better and better. One of the things I do tell my staff all the time is, if you think you can't get better, then you need to get out, because we always need to get better. There's always more that we can do to improve ourselves and our programming. And, you know, that philosophy is the kind of applicant that I'm looking for. I'm looking for somebody who can come in and say, gosh, Lisa, I wonder if we could try this because I think it would really make sense. You know, those are the employees that I'm looking for. I don't need robots. I need people who can think on their feet and add and contribute to the program. It's important to be able to give your employees what they need to do their job. I always say my job is to make sure they can do their job. And so, you know, that's very important, because there's nothing more frustrating than needing materials or supplies and not having it. You know, I need glue and we don't have glue. Are you kidding me? You know, we're a childcare program. Of course we should have that. So I know that with money stretching is that we have to make it stretch. Sometimes that can be a challenge as well. But for programs, I have applicants who tell me that they've had to purchase a bunch of their own materials for their classroom. And that just is really hard for me to swallow, because as a profession, that's not acceptable. And we need to make sure that that doesn't happen. And I always say I can get $1.10 out of every dollar. We are all very good at stretching those pennies as far as they can go, but there's just some things you can't do without. And making sure that your staff have what they need goes a long way for retention. One of my staff told me, when I asked my staff, so what is it about this place that you like to work at? Like, what's the things that are good here? And one of my staff told me that she liked the consistency. When we make decisions, we try to make them based on what's best for the child, and then what's best for the family, and then what's best for the staff. And I find that I like to do that decision-making process that way, because it helps me look in the mirror at night, because I know that I've done the best I can for kids. But it also gives my staff that opportunity and that understanding that that's how we think here. And so they're able to make decisions on their own, knowing that I'm going to back them if that's kind of the formula that they've used. And that gives them some real opportunities to again, improve the program, which if you've got buy-in with your staff and they feel like they're valued, you're going to be able to keep them much longer. And so, you know, that consistency is really important. I think reviewing your philosophy of your home or your childcare is always a very important thing to do. And we usually do that here once a year. I added into this packet it's the sample, it's the recruitment and retention plan. It's what I've got right now in my employee handbook, this first page. I won't go through all of it. Know that when I started as a director at Wiggins Preschool, this list was not nearly this long as far as benefits went. It took me time and searching things out and collaborating with a lot of different people to be able to offer some of these benefits that I'm able to offer now. I am part of the school district, but I still have to be able to fund myself. So it's one of those things that you're able, sometimes you just have to go outside the box, think outside the box to try to find some things that the benefits you can afford to be able to get them for your staff. The next page is just your employee handbook. I think the employee handbook is extremely valuable. Again, it tells your new staff and your current staff what is really important and what the program policies are, the protocols are. It tells them everything that they need to know, but it also makes them feel welcome. So when I have a new applicant, I'm going to tell them, this is where you can park on your very first day. This is, all those things that you may not know and makes you feel like the newbie. You want them to feel comfortable as fast as you can, comfortable in asking questions, but also you're going to get the best work out of somebody who is feeling comfortable about their position and learning what they're going to do. We have, so many trainings that we have to do. I think it almost overloads a new person coming in if they haven't been in the field for very long. And that can be a real struggle for them to feel comfortable because there's just so much coming at them. And if you just kind of touch base every so often, I always say I touch base at the end of the first day, I touch base at the end of the first week, and then the second week, and then I just kind of keep going from there, depending on what I see their needs are. One of the things that I have that I'm very fortunate in is that I have cameras in the classroom, which allows me to kind of watch those new staff a little bit closer without them knowing, and so they give me a more natural feel for what they're doing in their classroom. The good part about that is that because the staff here trusts me, putting those cameras in, I have people all the time say, oh, I'm sure, staff didn't like that. My staff was thrilled to get cameras in the classroom. Number one, I presented it and I use it, that it is a protection for them. We've had parents make accusations that I could say, let me go back and look at the camera, and then we found out that it was not true. But also staff knows that that I will be able to help them. If there's something going on in the classroom, I'm more than happy to go in and kind of tag in and help out in the classroom if they need it. And so those are kind of things that that you can consider doing, but the bottom line is you're trying to support your staff. And that's what we want to do. I always think that it's important to determine if your staff people, you're going to have some that are intrinsic and some that are extrinsic forms of appreciation. I have a couple of staff members that all I have to do is notice that they did something, tell them that I noticed it, that I really appreciated it, that I thought it went well. That's all they need. Some of my staff need to have some treats, and I put a list here of just a few of the things that I've used in the past. I think it's just important to notice them and to notice when they're doing well. A couple things, I put the tiger paws. What that is there's a slip of paper that a staff person writes a compliment to another staff person. It goes into a box, and we go through that box at meetings, and I read those out loud, and we're all proud of each other and happy with each other. All of the people who had their names in the box that week, then there's a drawing and there's a prize for them. Now, these are not expensive prizes either, by the way, but you'd think they would be, because they really do like to get them. But it's just kind of things, again, that they might like. I think it's important to notice that to celebrate things that are big goals, little goals. We were just talking today that we have a little girl that has some significant special needs, and the teacher was talking to me about that she thought the little girl was about ready to start drinking from a cup. And her peers, just the other teachers, were just so thrilled for her because they knew that that was such a big goal for that little girl, and that the teacher had worked very hard for it. And you know, I think it's that support that if we as administrators, if we model that, that goes a long way to showing staff what you want them to do for each other as well. And I think, you know, those are the things that make retention really hang in there, because people want to be somewhere where they're valued. It's a field that we don't always get a lot of value. And I think that, you know, the ones of us that are in this profession, we need to stick together and let each other know how much we appreciate each other and the hard work that they do. Some of the things that I also do is I tell my staff from the very first day, if you have if you're ready to tag, we call it tagging out. If you just need a break and you need out of there, even though it's not your break time or whatever, all you have to do is give me the heads up and I'm coming in, and I'm not going to there's nothing negative about that. We all need to step out sometimes. We sometimes just, it's just the situation. It might be just how we're feeling that day. There can be so many different factors, and it's okay to just say, I need 10 minutes and I'm happy to go in and help cover the classroom so that the person can get out, take a breather, get it back together again, or just be able to take a breath. And I think that those are kind of important. And I always want them to know that that's not a negative consequence. Recognizing that they need that time is super important. I also try to make sure that nobody has the yuck jobs. In our program, assistant teachers are not the ones who change kids all the time. They are not the ones who have to clean the tables all the time. We actually, even though we have assistant teachers with their education level and their experience level, they alternate the duties with the lead teacher, and it just makes a teaching team. I talk very often about the teaching team. Now, obviously, there's somebody who's a lead teacher because they have the education and the experience that's required by licensing and by our quality standards, but you still want to be able to let them not be the ones who just always has the awful jobs in the program. I think building teams, again, that's why relationships are so important. I've listed a few resources there. One of the things that I just want to tell you is, how do you fund all this kind of stuff? I write a lot of grants, and I know that gives the EBGBs to people, but just know that writing grants, really, once you start doing it, it's not that hard. It sounds harder than it is, and I would really encourage you to do that. Always feel free to contact me anytime. I'm Wiggins Preschool, and I'd be happy to help you with any grants or any other funding sources that you might need. Sometimes we have to, again, think out of the box to get our funding.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lisa. And just so everyone knows, I will go ahead and share this list of resources here that Lisa shared with us. And we will pause on any questions now. I don't see anything in the chat, but pause on questions now, and we will move to our next presenter. And then following Diane Price and her quick video on training tips, we'll open it up for any questions for Diane and Lisa. So Diane Price, those of you who were in attendance last week are familiar with Diane. And as last week, she recorded a pre-recording for us. So without further ado, Diane Price on training tips.
Hi, everybody. Good to see you again. Andrew asked if I would talk with you a little bit about professional development tips, and I'm not sure I have any. I think I may have a few, I don't know. I think this is really difficult right now with COVID in terms of doing the kind of professional development we may be used to or we'd like to try. These are difficult times, and we've found it's really hard to do this. But I wanted to tell you a little bit about how we organized our professional development. A long time ago, I heard someone talk about trainings, an hour training here and an hour training there, and the kind of training that we've been doing for a pretty long time with early care and education professionals. And she referred to it as spray and pray. And I had to smile because, you know, we spray a lot of information and then we pray something sticks. And that we'll see a change when they move in, when teachers are in a classroom interacting with children. And it just doesn't happen that way. It's not the best way for learning, I don't think. And so we've moved to more of a coaching model. And we've been fortunate enough to be able to, because of the way we operate, our directors are coaches in our classroom. And then we have 2 curriculum and instruction coaches that help work too, and some behavioral health coaches. So I know I sound like a lot, but you know, we have a pretty large operation at several sites. So a few years ago, we decided that we really wanted to do a more intense approach to our professional development with our staff and move to a coaching model. And so what we did was take a look at our curriculum, which is a blend of the creative curriculum and the storybook journey, which is a curriculum developed in Boulder, Colorado. And we call it the creative storybook journey. Yes. And then we also took a look at the goals we had for social emotional development for our kiddos, and we used Pyramid as a framework and training for all of our teachers. And so we wanted, and then we also looked at gold because of child outcomes, and we wanted to see where those things crossed and where we had this opportunity to define the work we wanted to do or the work we wanted to have our teachers be able to do in the classrooms. So from that, a work group, which included our professional development team, included our behavioral health team, included teachers, included directors, sat down and came up with a set of 10 goals that covered all of the areas that encompassed our curriculum, pyramid, and our child outcomes through gold. And from that, developed a list of strategies to kind of help teachers focus in on areas that they wanted to choose. And so we have this set of 10 goals. And by the way, I'm going to send these documents to Andrew so he has a chance to throw them up on the screen so you can see them. I don't have them in slides tonight. But they can pick a goal, and then they pick 3 strategies. And those are the strategies and the goals that they want to work on. And then we pick a common strategy for the entire organization. For example, this year we picked literacy, and we have strategies in there. So what we've done is allow teachers to determine what they want their professional development personalized plan to be, determine what those goals are, look at some strategies that they might be able to work on. Directors have that, our coaches have that. And then we do what we call reflective practice. And so those directors or those coaches work in the classrooms with our teachers and observe and give feedback to our teachers on how they're doing in those particular areas on the goals and strategies they selected. And then we sit down and visit with those teachers and go through those goals and those strategies and give them feedback so they can reflect on their practice in the classroom. And then from there, we do coaching. So we might go in and say, what would you like us to work on with you? Would you like to role model something? Are there some things you want to sit in? We'll sit in with you on lesson planning to try to determine how to integrate this into your lesson planning, whatever the needs of the teachers are. And then all of that is tied to their annual appraisal. So it gives us that full picture of teachers having an individualized professional development plan, goals they've chosen that they'd like to work on, reflective practice from a coach that helps them see what they're seeing, what they're observing in the classroom, having a chance to be coached on particular things through role modeling or assistance during lesson planning, and then again, tied to that appraisal. How did that go over that year? And we found this to be a really effective way of implementing professional development that meets the individualized needs of our teachers. Just like we want to meet the individualized needs of our kiddos, we want to do that for our teachers too. And it gives them buy-in to the improvements they want to see in their classroom. And it also gives their directors or their coaches an opportunity to see where changes need to happen and where we can improve practice. So it's been a good way for us to operate our organization around professional development. And we have been able to continue that through COVID because our directors are just in the centers where their classrooms are, and our coaches are assigned to a classroom based on the needs of the children and or the ages that the children are in that center. We have someone that's really good with infants and toddlers, someone's really good with school agers, so we've had them select classrooms for them to work with. And I think this might be a way for us to think about how we're going to grow our teachers, how we're going to grow our professionals, and allow them to be fully vested in what they want to improve their practice, and for us to get what we need to be able to demonstrate to parents, to funders, to our state, that we really are meeting the individualized needs of our teachers and our children, and we're improving the outcomes for kiddos. So again, as I said, I will send these documents to Andrew. He can throw them up on the screen for you. And if you decide you'd like some more information about that, Andrew knows how to get in touch with me. We're happy to share with you anything that we're doing or help you think through some of the things that you might like to try at your center. Thanks, and I'll see you next week on the panel.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Diane. Let me get out of the full screen mode here. I will pop up here on the screen. She did share those resources as she mentioned, so I will pop those up. While we have just a quick moment though, again, thank you to Lisa, thank you to Diane for your time. Do we have any questions for Lisa while we still have her on today's call? Feel free to utilize the chat or go ahead and unmute yourself as well. And while we wait for questions, I'm gonna quickly just kind of scroll through these resources here that were provided. These will be included in a follow-up email as well.
Andrew, I just want to make a comment that, regarding, what Lisa presented and even what Courtney presented. I know, it's such a, how would I put this? It's such, early child care is such an area that is so sensitive, and all of the things that Lisa talked about, it brings to mind how complex it is in the whole hiring process for the owners, because of all the background checks and all of the references, everything that they have to do because of the sensitivity that it is for children, as well as for the applicant in doing all the training, the fingerprinting and all of that. And you almost, wonder again that, they're going to get paid $100 an hour, but they're not. And that, it just makes it much more precious of what everybody's doing. Just wanted to comment on that.
Thanks, Jeffrey. And Lisa, you have anything else to kind of share or add on to what you had discussed?
One thing that I just wanted to throw out there, I know I talked really fast because I only had a few minutes, but one of the things that I've also found that works well for me is I've got 10 staff people, and 3 of them I had as preschool children when I was their teacher. And I have figured out that for our area in rural Colorado, I needed to grow my own staff. I had a middle school student ask me last week what she needed to do if she wanted to do this. You better believe that I grabbed her, told her everything, and I'm going to keep an eye on her. So we just kind of, sometimes it takes a while to get people that, the staff that we want. And it's just, again, thinking outside that box. So that poor middle schooler got an earful, but I could hardly wait because I'm really excited to see if that's really where she wants to end up. And I'm going to help her support. I'm going to let her know where I am and that she can contact me anytime for support. So sometimes we have to figure out some other alternatives.
Awesome. Anything else from the group here off the top of your head? I don't see anything in the chat. Nobody is unmuting. So that'll just lead us to our next.
Andrew?
Yes,
it's
ma'am.
Lori.
Oh, hey, Lori.
I was just, is someone taking care of Karen's question?
Let me hop in the chat. I did not see that come across. Let me look. Can you go ahead and read that, Lori, while you have it up? Yes, I believe Karen, yes. So sorry about that. Courtney is taking that offline.
Okay, I just want to make sure that, and I did see a note here that Amanda was asking about a county, but I'm just saying, I just don't want that to get left undone.
Wonderful. Yes, thank you.
Because unfortunately, that particular situation has hit other providers as well. So having guidance is going to be really key on this one and knowing what to do. So Karen, thanks for the question.
Yeah, thank you.
And I'm sorry, it's a tough one. It's a tough one.
Absolutely, very important. And thank you, team, for helping address that question offline. And we will be sending a copy of Lisa's complete document that she provided as well. So just to address another question in the chat there. Great, that leads us to our next activity. Much like last week, we are gonna just break out into breakout rooms. Like I said, our consultants will be present in the rooms as well as our speakers from today. So we're gonna go ahead and break out now. Okay, everyone, welcome back. Just gonna let everybody funnel in from those breakout rooms. Sorry to interrupt. If we did, hope everybody had a great conversation in your individualized rooms. As we let everybody filter in, I'm going to welcome our next presenter. Her name is Joanne Schmitz. Joanne is a lawyer as a second career. She founded her first law firm in 2002 and has represented numerous companies from single-person startups to multi-million-dollar privately held entities. She's an active volunteer member of the SBDC Advisory Board and an active participant with the SBDC as a whole. She's going to be talking to us this evening about daycare provider legal concerns, and very happy to have her on the call tonight. So take it away, Joanne.
Good evening, everyone. Can you tell me, can you see the slides?
We are good.
Okay, excellent. Well, it's a privilege to talk to you tonight about employment considerations for daycare providers. And what I'm going to do is leverage a few lessons from your favorite children's book as a part of this training this evening. So we're going to talk a little bit about employees, independent contractors, and then the current laws that are changing in terms of paid sick leave and the impact of COVID and equal wages. So let me just start with the, let's see here. Can you tell me, are you seeing a full screen or are you seeing the slide screen?
I'm seeing
Just
the full
the
screen.
slide.
Okay, you see that now? Is it gone to disclaimer?
Joanne, I'm still seeing the heading screen, the daycare provider title page.
Okay. Well, what is going on here? Okay, hang on one second. I need to reset the screen, I guess.
No problem. Not the first technology issues we've had.
Okay, hopefully that's got it fixed. We'll give it a try. Okay, so now do you see a disclaimer slide? Okay, so now do you see the disclaimer slide?
Yep, we do.
Okay, so the purpose of this training is for education only. It's not intended to be legal advice. It shouldn't be interpreted as legal advice, and you need to get your own professional for any specific questions that you might have with respect to legal issues. Okay, Uncle, we'll go back to the other screen. I'm so sorry. Okay, do you see the agenda?
Yep.
Okay, well, maybe it's working. I don't know. It could be user error. So what we're going to cover tonight is first things first, your first employee interview. Like I said, independent contractor or employee. If you're not you're still not sure, and utilizing SBDC consultants. Okay, so first things first. You may remember Imogene's Antlers by David Small, and the first sentence of this book is, on Thursday, when Imogene woke up, she found she had grown antlers. So you're going to need to deal with that first. Okay, so first things first, in terms of common hiring mistakes, interpreted as expensive. Be sure before you hire an employee to make sure what type of employment you might need, whether that employment fits within your strategic plan, whether you need part-time, seasonal, or a full-time staffing. A strong encouragement that you should complete your sufficient diligence on the applicant before making an offer. You would do that by conducting interviews, checking references, and checking social media. And where possible, interview multiple candidates. I know that right now that's difficult for some of your daycare facilities. And make all of your hiring decisions consistent with your strategic plan. Okay, so you've targeted an applicant and you're ready for your first interview. This is the first line from the very first Harry Potter's book, and it's Mr. and Mrs. Dursley of number 4 Privet Drive were proud to say that they were perfectly normal. Thank you very much. Until you learned a little more about them. So let's talk about your first employee and the interview. Know which interview questions are legal and which interview questions may be illegal. I have a list here of areas that you need to be careful with respect to your interview questions. So for example, let's talk about age. If your applicant appears to be 40 or over, you could be subject to age discrimination depending on what type of interview questions you ask. You certainly can't ask something like, what year did you graduate from high school? Because that clearly could identify what age the applicant is. However, if age is a requirement for the position, you certainly can ask if the person is 21, for example, if they were serving alcohol, if they needed to drive a car, and you could ask, can they present their proof of age at the point that you hire them. Another easy area is arrests, to get in trouble with arrests. You cannot ask, have you ever been arrested? Because in our country, you're innocent until proven guilty. However, you can ask if you were convicted of any felonies. So there's several questions that, depending on how you ask them in an interview, they could be perfectly legal or they may be illegal. So if you're not sure on these, get some training, get some legal advice. Okay, is this person you're hiring going to be an employee or an independent contractor? Well, unfortunately, there's not a bright line, which is from A Wrinkle in Time. It was a dark and stormy night. You don't know exactly what's happening. So the law is somewhat vague. There's not a bright line around who's an employee and who's an independent contractor. But the major one is the level of degree of control of the employee. So do you have the right to direct the activities of the person? Do you supply tools? Do you supply the place where the person will work? Are the work that the person is doing ancillary or routine to your business? How is their pay structured, if it's fixed, hourly versus per job? Do fringe benefits apply? And how do the parties treat the transaction, for a few of the factors that might apply? So I don't know if you have this handout or not, Andrew. This is specifically for daycare providers, and I can get a copy of this to you if needed. This is a list of the factors that tend to show that the person is an employee of your business when you're considering that. So you can require them to comply with your instructions about when, where, and how to work. You provide the training. The services are integrated into your business operations. You require the person to perform the services personally. You have a continuing relationship with the worker. You establish the set hours. The worker works on your premises and it does the work that you specifically identify in the sequence that you identify. So here's a bunch of factors that would tend to indicate that the person you hired is an employee. Okay, so you've hired an employee and there are a lot of different, things are a lot different around here since that unicorn moved in. Is from Unicorn Things, He's Pretty Great by Bob Shea. And so when you hire an employee, I strongly encourage you to draft a written employee agreement. A letter advising the hiring is not sufficient. You need to have a written employment agreement. And it identifies the employee's wages, the term of employment, the benefits information, and it would typically include confidentiality, non-assignment of rights, non-solicitation of other employees, and a non-compete provision. These areas of law are very state specific. Now I want to talk to you a little bit about the non-compete provision. If you're working to cross-train this person, particularly with yourself, because you might like to take a day off now and then, you're most likely introducing them to some trade secrets of your business. For example, your client listing, you might have discovered that if you advertise in a particular way, you get more clients. You know, if you put something in a particular publication on the third week of the month or whatever that trade secret is. If you are sharing trade secrets around your business, then you can enforce a non-compete provision. Now, let me just share something that happened, which is similar to a child care facility, and this was a dance studio. And the owner of the dance studio had 8 to 10 instructors, and she worked with them for, I don't know, 5 to 10 years, and she taught them all about how to run a dance studio. She didn't have a written employment agreement. And, you know, one day they just, 6 of the instructors came to her and said, we're going to open a new studio down the street. And they took over half the students with them, and there was really nothing she could do about it because she didn't have a written employment agreement. So I encourage you, even though you feel like you might not need one, it's highly advisable to have one because you don't want your team opening another daycare facility 2 blocks away. The other reason that, just going back, the other reason that you want it in writing is because mood, memory, and misunderstanding happens over time. So if it's in writing, it's pretty clear what everybody agreed to at that point in time. Now that you have an employee, you need to make sure you have all your federal and state income tax, Social Security information, Social Security tax from taxable wages. You must file your federal tax returns. And here's an important thing to remember. If you collect taxes from an employee, but then you don't pay those taxes as needed, you are liable 100% of a penalty if you fail to file the proper forms or pay the taxes. And in this case, this type of debt is not dischargeable in bankruptcy. So the penalty is high if you don't carry through with what you need to do from a withholding standpoint with employees. You must pay unemployment taxes. You need to get workers' and comp insurance. The fine for not having workers' comp insurance, if you're found out, is $500 a day. So it's a pretty stiff fine. And once you have an employee, it's also time to get that handbook for employees together if you haven't already done so. Okay, so now factors showing whether the worker is an independent contractor. And there's a lot of factors down here: paid by the job, works at her own office or his own office. But the real differentiator is whether the person will realize a profit or a loss from the services. So the example of this in your context might be somebody that comes in to teach music once a week, or dance, or soccer. So they would be an independent person coming to your facility to provide that service once a week for a period maybe of 3 months, something like that. That would be an independent contractor. The list of things that will not change. And again, this is a perfect example of why you want to put things in writing. So the independent contractor agreement, again, use one. It's used to identify the services, the term, the payment that's expected by the contractor, that the relationship is an independent contractor, they're not an employee, that they're hired because of specific expertise that they have, they're free to work for others, you're not providing any employee benefits or insurance for this person. It usually has a confidentiality clause, it should. And the law requires that some parts of the independent contractor agreement are in bold. Again, this is state-specific law, so I encourage you to get legal assistance. And I have at the bottom of this slide, don't Frankenstein. What I mean by that is a lot of times my clients have a tendency to go on the internet and look up various examples of, let's say, an independent contractor agreement. So they grab a few paragraphs from this one, a few paragraphs from that one. They bring it in, they're all happy because they put this independent contractor agreement together, and I should just read through it quickly and find out, and approve it. Well, that takes a lot of extra time on my part because where you pulled those sections from, we don't know what jurisdiction that's from. You may not remember. Where if I just start with some contractor agreements that I already have that are established that I know are consistent with Colorado law, it's a lot quicker than trying to clean up a Frankenstein document. So in any context, I encourage you not to Frankenstein, but absolutely go out and educate yourself. Okay, so if you're still not sure whether you have an employee or an independent contractor, like There Is No Lake at Camp Green Lake Holes is one of my favorite movies, a book made into a movie, a fabulous movie if you haven't seen it. You seek legal advice because one size doesn't fit all. So sometimes somebody might be functioning as an employee, but in other contexts, they may be functioning as an independent contractor. Just because you've identified them as an independent contractor doesn't mean that they're always going to be an independent contractor, depending on how the relationship develops. From an IRS standpoint, you can use Form SS-8 to determine the work status of the employee for the purpose of federal employment taxes and income tax withholding. What I want to caution you on is that's only for IRS designations. It doesn't, unfortunately, there's not a common definition of what an employee is. So workers' comp has one, state withholding has one, unemployment, all of those may differ in terms of how they identify an employee, which makes it ridiculously complex for you, but why you need to seek legal advice if you're not sure. Okay, here's a couple things I want to talk to you about that have happened recently. The first one is the Equal Pay for Equal Work Act. This is just an introduction to this act, and I strongly encourage you to get more training on it. The purpose of this Colorado Act is to close wage gaps starting January 1st, 2021. So it prohibits paying employees of different sexes differently for the similar work. All employers in the state must comply regardless of size. So, if you've just got a staff of 3, if you've got a staff of 16, you must comply. It gets pretty complicated in terms of the things that you must track. So I strongly encourage you to get some training on the specifics. For example, you must track the history of your job openings, how you post promotion opportunities. You must have a review of your job description and keep a record of those. You have to keep wage rate histories for employees. You have, you can't prohibit employees from discussing compensation. You can't ask for a wage history of job applicants. That's no longer legal. And you can't retaliate or discriminate if someone fails to disclose wage history. On the other hand, that's a strange requirement since they can discuss that anyways. So very detailed record requirements for employers. It does have some exceptions for wage differentials. There's about 5 or 6 of them that I don't have listed here. It contains a safe harbor if you conduct a pay equity audit. Now, it's called that in the statute, but there isn't a lot of detail in the statute around what a pay equity audit is. So that will probably be defined as well, but I would encourage each of you to get a pay equity audit so you don't have to worry about all those other complicated things we just talked about. And here's the real rub. You can have penalties up to $10,000 for anybody found violating this new statute. And the next one that I want to talk to you about is the Healthy Families and Workplaces Act. This is the introduction to the paid sick leave. And again, I encourage you to get more detailed training on this act, but it requires paid sick leave under specific conditions. And you're probably aware that one of the first provisions took place on July 15th, which required you to give sick leave or paid sick leave for anybody that might be out due to COVID symptoms or COVID-related requirements. So employers with fewer than 500 employees were required to comply with the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, and that mandates the sick leave or extended family or medical leave for reasons related to COVID. Additionally, there's additional provisions that are effective on January 1st, 2021 for employers with 16 or more employees. And those requirements are that you must have 1 hour of sick leave for every 30 hours worked to a maximum of 48 hours paid sick leave per year. Part-time employees must also be covered on a pro rata basis. And you can, as an employer, choose, if you want, to provide more than 48 hours of sick leave annually by the employer's choice. Okay, so I know we have a limited amount of time, so I really went through things quickly this evening. I think, oh, one other thing I wanted to share with you is do not be afraid to use your SBDC consultants. You have fabulous consultants, I'm sure, in Eastern Colorado. I'm from the Colorado Springs area, and one of our employment law consultants is Jean Thornton. And Jean has this excellent blog at the Pikes Peak SBDC website, and I put the URL for you at the bottom of this slide that talks about hiring tips for independent contractors. And he says his 3 tips are: don't misclassify workers as independent contractors when legally they're employees. And it's real tempting to do that because when you have an employee, there's a lot more records that you must keep, and you must, adhere to all the withholding and so forth. So it's easy sometimes to try to do the independent contractor, make the independent contractor decision when that's probably not the smartest thing for you to do from your business standpoint. We talked about this point too. Don't assume that just because a worker is an independent contractor for one purpose, he or she is an independent contractor for all purposes. So you need to examine each thing that that person might be doing for your business. And Jean recommends having a written independent contractor agreement, which we talked about. And Joanne's corollary, which is not in this blog, is to use a written employment agreement as well. I don't want you to be the dance studio example. Okay, so that's what I have for this evening. I'm more than willing to answer any questions. I think we probably have 2 or 3 minutes left. My favorite ending is in an old house in Paris that was covered with vines, lived 12 little girls in 2 straight lines. And of course, that's the most famous opening from the book Madeline. So thank you very much. If you have any questions, I'm available for questions for a few minutes.
I had a question. Can you hear me?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I do home childcare, and I've recently acquired a substitute who can come in and work while I'm away from the program. I had her fill out some forms as an independent contractor, but I was looking at some of your slides and I might be wrong. She does have to work for me. She does have to work in my home. She does have to do what I tell her, but mostly because that's licensing rules and regulations. How do I determine if I'm accurate in keeping her? Because she has the right to choose if she wants to. Like if I ask her, hey, do you want to work Friday? And she can say yes or no.
Is she working for other daycare?
Not currently, but I'm not prohibiting her from doing so.
Do you have a written independent contract agreement with her?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Well, one way or the other, you need to establish what the relationship is going to be. It's hard for me to just, like I said in the earlier disclaimer, just give you an immediate answer to that off the cuff. I will put my email in the chat. And if you want to email me, we can talk about some specifics, because I could argue that either way based on what you've described.
Okay. That'd be great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Joanne. Any other questions out there at the moment?
Joanne, I have a question. In the very first part about some of the interview questions that you should not ask, you have one of the things was photographs. Can you go into that a little bit more? What do you mean by that?
Photographs. I'm trying to remember what the issue is around photographs. You know, I don't know. That's a good question. Let me look at my notes real quick here. Hang on with me. Okay, so in a photograph context, it's unlawful to request that an applicant submit a photo at any time prior to hiring. It's lawful for you to request a photograph after hiring for identification purposes.
Okay, thank you. I couldn't figure out what that was. So thank you. That clarifies that.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I couldn't remember that off the top.
That's fine.
So this is night 3 of 4 nights for you guys?
Yeah, that's correct. This is week 3. Yep.
When you mentioned get training on the new apps, where can I get training on those? Or who can assist me with that?
Do you guys have training set up, Andrew?
I believe your best bet would be to connect with your consultant that you're working with, and they would be able to point you in the right direction for that training.
Okay, thank you.
Wonderful. And Joanne, while we have you, would love, again, thank you so much for your time and all of the valuable information, not only to you, but to all of our speakers here this evening. And while we still have you and Courtney on the line, would love for you just to take a quick couple minutes and give us all, I guess, an understanding of your services, how you're here to help this community if they should utilize your services. I'll let you kick it off, Joanne, since we have you here live.
Okay. Well, I have been working with the Colorado Springs SBDC for probably 10 years, and I do a lot of leading edge training. There's some straight up leading edge training that happens, I think it's a 12 or 13 week program. It happens 3 or 4 times a year. So I teach on general legal concepts for establishing a business. I've also been working on the COVID task force. And so we're working specifically with businesses that are having issues due to COVID. A lot of times that might be not being able to afford rent, particularly in the context of restaurants and other businesses providing services of that type. And then we just do general training. Like another training that I do is how to use legal resources to increase or maximize the value of your business. So training, and I don't necessarily do a lot of the individual one-on-one consulting for us, but there's a lot of consultants that do, and they all have their areas of specialty like finance, marketing, manufacturing, those type of areas.
Wonderful, thank you. And it does look like we still have Courtney on the line as well. Courtney was our HR professional who spoke earlier. Courtney, tell us a little bit about your services.
You bet. In my day job is what I'll call it at Courtside Consulting, which is my consulting business. I work with small business owners all across the state and actually nationally. One of the things that I think is really important is to create an atmosphere of success for your employees and make sure that that performance success, that you get them to a high level of performance success. And so a couple of things that I'm doing right now with my clients, actually Joanne mentioned, one of those is the handbook and making sure that your handbook is up to date or that you have a handbook. And then the other thing is a job description library, which becomes even more important now with the Equal Pay for Equal Work Act, as everyone needs job descriptions. And so we have we offer a job description library that people can go to and find job descriptions. So those services, if you want to learn more about those particular services, I have a couple of offers with handbooks, one with an online portal that you can go to and get a whole bunch of HR resources, tools, access to laws, access to documents and to templates and checklists and those types of things, plus get your handbook done. And then I have another offer that offers all of those things, but you also get an HR professional, like a live HR experienced professional who's certified in human resources to answer your questions 12 hours a day, Monday through Friday, except for holidays. So I have that offer. And if you want to go to handbookhelp.com, you can read information about it, see what's included. And there's actually a little video of me just talking about it and showing you the portal. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about those services. I think a handbook can be the most important document for employment, for an employer to have, and to make sure that it's up to date with all of the new regulations. As Joanne said, the COVID regulations, the paid sick leave, the healthy families for healthy and healthy workplaces, as well as the Equal Pay for Equal Work Acts that are coming into Colorado are so important. So if you have any questions or just want to talk to me about that, you can certainly call me. My number's on that handbookhelp.com. You'll find me there. Or you can just give me a call at 720-328-8870. Let me know you're in this class. I'd love to talk to you. I'm going to give you guys some discounts on the pricing and make sure that you can get into it. The pandemic's rough enough. Let's get you into a handbook easy and get you the support you need after you implement the handbook. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Courtney. Thank you, Joanne. Thank you, Lisa. And thanks, Diane, for all of your valuable information tonight. Wouldn't be able to put this program on without your help. So thank you so much for all that you've done tonight. Just wanted to discuss next steps with you. I know we've had some homework for you each night just in preparation for the following week. So I'm going to share my screen here now and then let Jen and Jesse just talk about some details that are needed to better prepare you here for next week.
Wonderful. So speaking about homework, as Andrew mentioned, this week we're just going to reiterate, I think, what all of the presenters have kind of touched on is now I think is a good week to kind of reflect on and review your employee handbook and your job descriptions. And if you need somebody to talk that through, then when you meet with your consultant this week, it's going to be a great opportunity to do that. Now going into next week, uh, we are going to be having two topics. The first, which is going to be marketing. So just recommend that you kind of put your marketing hat on and think about what you're currently doing with your marketing, what you're satisfied with, not satisfied with, and we'll be discussing some changes that can be made or how you can improve your marketing next week. But the second topic, I think, is going to be a fun, interactive one, because we will have 3 childcare providers talking on a panel, and it's going to be a very frank, open discussion where they're going to be able to answer your questions. So that's going to be the other thing I just encourage you to do this week, is to think about what burning questions maybe we haven't been able to touch on yet, and this can be any topic. We're going to leave the floor open, but you'll have 3 very knowledgeable child care providers that'll be able to brainstorm kind of ideas and answer those questions with tips and best practices for you. So that's what I would recommend you focus on for this week in preparation for our week 4 and our final week together.
Awesome. Thanks, Jen. And then I just want to thank you all for putting that time in your calendar with your consultant. It is important that we are following through with the homework and the scheduling of those consultations after the fact. And so for all of those who are doing it and are participating, just thank you so much for your participation. It makes the class better for all of us. So really appreciate you doing that. And then if there are any questions just about resources, I know technology isn't always the easiest of things, and there are some difficulties and challenges there within. So please, if you have any problems with any of the videos or any of the resources from this class that are delivered after the fact, please send me an email directly. My email's here. It's andrew@eastcoloradosbdc.com. Happy to point you in the right direction or email you hard copies of any of the materials that are shared throughout this class.
And Andrew, I just want to be able to just stress to all the class members that I want them just to continue to work on those financial budgets that I think are going to continuously be needed to be upgraded. So I think that the consultants that they're working with will have all of at least the templates that we provided them. I want them to continue to use some of those and or the financials that they're working with, but that's going to be important for them to continue to upgrade and be able to work with as we work through this class process. So.
And Andrew, I'm going to add one last thing that I forgot to mention before. Going way back to week 1, when we sent out the survey for the market research report request and the business model canvas request, if you have not had a chance to fill out that survey, we ask that you do that by tomorrow. We are going to mail out those business model canvases and make sure that we pull the rest or make the rest of those market research report requests this week. That'll be happening Thursday. So if you can have all of that, if you have not completed that survey and you still would like to get those resources, please complete by tomorrow.
Wonderful. Thanks, Jen. And if anyone needs that link, again, I can definitely provide it. I will include it as well, just in a follow-up email, but happy to send that out to anybody who might need that link again as well. As usual, if you are not already, please join our newsletter, East Coast News. Feel free to text East Coast News to 22828 for any updates on SBDC workshops and events. All of our events are posted here. Our team is working diligently on a 2021 schedule, so a lot of planning going on right now. So look for a lot of events that hit our website here over the next couple of months here for 2021. Thank you so much for your time. I know we're running a little bit late here this evening, but just want to thank you all for your participation. Our next session, same time, same place, November 24th. You kind of have your homework assignments. If there are any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us or the consultants. We will be kind of staying on here just for 2-3 more minutes here after today's presentation, just to answer any questions. But again, thank you so much for your participation. Thanks for your time tonight. Doesn't look like that video wants to show. That photo wants to show. I did want to mention too, I know we had brought this up and that was one of the next slides, but we do have the social media masterclass with Brian Cato taking place. It is on December 6th. So Would love for you all to participate and join that if you are able. It is catered specifically to the childcare industry, so a lot of valuable information to be gained from that workshop here following our 4-week course.